Hello dear viewers, in this video I am going to present I Shall Return to This Bengal. I Shall Return to This Bengal is a famous poem of the English version of আবার আসিব ফিরে ধানসিঁড়িটির তীরে এই বাংলায়. It is written by Jibanananda Das. Friends, Jibanananda Das was born on 18th February 1899 in the city of Borishal under the Bengal presidency of British India, now in Bangladesh. He was one of the leading modern Bengali poets and writers of the 20th century. He is one of the pioneers of modernity in Bengali poetry. His ancestors were residents of Bikrampur Pargana in the Dhaka district in Bangladesh, but his grandfather Sarbananda Dasgupta relocated from Bikrampur to Borishal. His grandfather was a Hindu by birth. Later he was initiated into Brahmo. However, his father Satyananda Dasgupta is the second son of his grandfather, and Jibanananda's mother was Kusum Kumari Das, was mainly a householder, but she wrote poems. Her well-known poem Ideal Boy, আমাদের দেশে কবে সেই ছেলে হবে কথায় না বড় হয়ে কাজে বড় হবে, is still a text for the children. Jibanananda Das was the eldest child of the parents and his nickname was Milu.
Jibanananda Das's
Singularity lies in his ability to perceive beauty in the unacknowledged and small objects of nature, and in that sense he truly made ordinary Bengal beautiful in the eyes of his readers. Jibanananda Das's poetry has the power to transport one to the obscure region of one's being and sensibility beyond the everyday bounds of sense and reason. He achieves it characteristically by endowing mystical attributions to mundane, everyday objects of nature, especially the ordinary objects that we see in and around Bengal, as Bengal was known then in its undivided entity. This rootedness of the imagination and sensibility is what makes Jibanananda Das a unique poet, different from almost all the modern poets of Bengal. Never before, perhaps, was there a poet in Bengal like Jibanananda, time and again, who made the so-called lowly and unattractive creatures and plants like Idur, Salik, Pecha, Kak, Chodui, Hash, Ghas or Akara, and so on, so ordinary yet significant. If transcendence is the uniqueness of Tagore's verse, then that of Jibanananda is surely immanence, and this quality perhaps establishes Jibanananda as one who comes after Tagore with altogether a new sensibility and quest. Never before or since were the poems of his kind written. Buddhadev Bose, in his book An Acre of Green Grass, rightly says of Jibanananda, a nature worshipper, but by no means a Platonist or pantheist. He is rather a pagan who loves the things of nature sensuously, not as tokens or symbols, nor as patterns of perfection, but simply because they are what they are. Friends, let us read the poem. I shall return to this Bengal, to the Dhansi's bank, perhaps not as a man but moina or fishing kite or dawn crow floating on the mist's bosom to alight. In the shade of this jackfruit tree, in this autumn harvest land, or maybe a dark younger's bells on my red feet, drifting on colmy scented waters all the day. For love of Bengal's rivers, fields, crops, I'll come this way to this green shore of Bengal, drenched by Zolangi's waves. বন্ধুরা, এই বিখ্যাত কবিতা আবার আসিব ফিরে, I shall return to this Bengal, আমি এই বাংলায় আবারও ফিরে আসব, to the ধানসিঁড়ি's bank, আবার আসিব ফিরে ধানসিঁড়িটির তীরে এই বাংলায়, perhaps not as a man, হয়তো মানুষ নয়, but ময়না or fishing kite, হয়তো বা শঙ্খ চিল শালিকের বেশে, শালিক ময়না, the white, grey or yellow bird famous in and familiar in Bengal. Moina, the great singing bird. Or fishing kite, white hawk একে বলা হয়, শঙ্খ চিল, সাদা চিল। or dawn crow, হয়তো ভোরের কাক হয়ে, floating on the mist's bosom to alight in the shade of this jackfruit tree in this autumn harvest land. এই কার্তিকের নবান্নের দেশে, হারভেস্ট ল্যান্ডের দেশে, অটাম হারভেস্ট ল্যান্ডে, কুয়াশার বুকে ভেসে একদিন আসিব এ কাঁঠাল ছায়ায়, ইন দ্য শেড অফ দিস জ্যাকফ্রুট ট্রি। অর মেবি এ ডাক, হয়তোবা হাঁস হব, এ ইয়াং গার্লস বেলস অন মাই রেড ফিট, কিশোরীর ঘুঙুর রহিবে লাল পায়, ড্রিফটিং অন কলমি সেন্টেড ওয়াটার্স অল দ্য ডে। কলমি ডাকউইড, একটা পুকুরে বা নদীতে যে লতানো গাছ, শাক হিসাবে ব্যবহার করা হয়, বিখ্যাত কলমি শাক। সারাদিন কেটে যাবে কলমির গন্ধ ভরা জলে ভেসে ভেসে, লাইক দ্য ডাক, হাঁসের মতো করে ভেসে ভেসে কেটে যাবে। ফর লাভ অফ বেঙ্গলস রিভার্স ফিল্ডস ক্রপস আই উইল কাম দিস ওয়ে, আবার আসিব আমি বাংলার নদী মাঠ ক্ষেত ভালোবেসে। টু দিস গ্রিন শোর অফ বেঙ্গল ড্রেন্সড বাই জলাঙ্গি ওয়েভস, জলাঙ্গির ঢেউয়ে ভেজা বাংলারে সবুজ করুণ ডাঙ্গায়। বন্ধুরা, এখানে যে শব্দগুলো পাচ্ছি, যে শঙ্খচিল, ফিশিং কাইটের কথা বলা হচ্ছে, এটা এক ধরনের সাদা চিল জাতীয় পাখি। এই যে ইয়াং গার্লস বেলস, বেল মানে এখানে ঘন্টা, মেয়েরা পায়ে এক ধরনের যে নুপুর বা পায়ের অলংকার, তাকে আসলে গার্লস বেলস বলা হয়েছে, ঘুঙুর। জলাঙ্গি, আসলে জলাঙ্গি হচ্ছে, কবি এখানে নদীকে, এই ধানসিঁড়ি নদীকে জলাঙ্গি বলে সম্বোধন করেছেন, মানে জল যার অঙ্গে, নদীমাতৃক বাংলাদেশকে কবি জলাঙ্গির ঢেউয়ে ভেজা বাংলা বলে বলেছেন। কার্তিকের নবান্নের দেশে মিনস ইন দিস অটাম হারভেস্ট ল্যান্ড, কবি নিজের জন্মভূমিটাকে, বাংলাদেশকে নবান্নের সাথে তুলনা করছেন। নবান্ন অর্থাৎ নতুন ভাত। কার্তিক মাসে ঘরে যখন নতুন ধান ওঠে, কৃষকেরা নবান্ন উৎসবে মেতে ওঠে। ফলে এই যে কবিতা আবার আসিব ফিরে, এটা রূপসী বাংলা কাব্য থেকে তো নেওয়া হয়েছে। আই শ্যাল রিটার্ন টু দিস বেঙ্গল, টু দ্য ধানসিরিজ ব্যাংক। এই কবিতায় কবি দেখাচ্ছেন তিনি নিজের দেশকে খুব ভালোবাসেন। প্রিয় জন্মভূমির এই তুচ্ছ জিনিসগুলো তার দৃষ্টিতে সুন্দর হয়ে ধরা দিচ্ছে। কবি মনে করেন যখন তার মৃত্যু হবে তখন দেশের সঙ্গে তার মমতার বাঁধন শেষ হবে না। তিনি বাংলার নদী, মাঠ, ফসলের ক্ষেতকে ভালোবেসে শঙ্খচিল বা শালিকের বেশে এসে এদেশে ফিরে আসবেন। আবার কখনো বা ভোরের কাক হয়ে কুয়াশায় মিশে যাবেন। এমনও হতে পারে তিনি হাঁস হয়ে সারাদিন কলমির গন্ধে ভরা বিলের জলে ভেসে বেড়াবেন। আসলে কবি বাংলাদেশের রূপময় যে প্রকৃতি, তার সঙ্গে মিশে যাচ্ছেন, যেন মিশে যেতে চেয়েছেন। এই কবিতাটি আমাদের কবির মাটির প্রতি, প্রকৃতির প্রতি কি ভীষণ ভালোবাসা, ভালো লাগা, তারই বহিঃপ্রকাশ যেন। The poet wants to return to this Bengal. Bengal is the place which has given him utmost fulfillment during his lifetime. And in death too, he desires the same place. No one really knows what happens after death. Yet the desire that the poet expresses is eternal. But to Bengal he will return not as a man. He will return as a moina, or a fishing kite, or a dawn crow, or maybe a duck. As a human being, he has perceived this life as an outsider. And that's why he will not return to this Bengal not as a man. হয়তো মানুষ নয়, মানুষ হয়ে আর তার ইচ্ছেও নেই ফিরে আসার। Now he wishes to be one with it, one with this life which is pulsating and which is strangely beautiful. This life is not completely knowable, understandable until and unless one is completely a part of it. And that's why the poet does not like to return to this Bengal as a man, but as the fishing kite, as the moina, shalik. তাই তো কবি বলছেন যে সারাদিন তিনি ঘুরে বেড়াবেন কলমির গন্ধ ভরা জলে ভেসে ভেসে। হয়তো কুয়াশার বুকে ভেসে একদিন তিনি কাঁঠাল ছায়ায় এসে বসবেন। দ্য পোয়েট ওয়ান্টস টু অ্যাকুয়ার নেচার, দ্য ডাইভার্সিটিজ অফ নেচার, বিইং এ পার্ট অফ ইট। Buddhadev Bose, in talking of Jibanananda's poetry, rightly says, he brings us no breath of heaven, nor blasts of hell, draws up no molten metal from the unfathomed mind, but he does is to intensify the everyday experience of our senses to a point where it seems transformed, transcendent, miraculous. He is important because he has brought a new note to our poetry, a new tone of feeling. এবং এই কবিতায় এই প্রথম অংশে আমরা সেই নতুন টোন, একটা নতুন ধারা যেন অনুভব করছি। Actually, Jibanananda's perception of life is that in making the ordinary extraordinary, and in making the animals of the lower kinds like owl, mouse, crow, duck, shalik, and so on desirable and capable of bringing out the poetic inspiration in him. He unties his self with the other, or rather cognizes the other almost in the postmodernist way. The philosophy that exudes from his poems is that of a wholesome living, wherein human beings are placed at a necessary oneness with this other side of life considered as irrational, subhuman. That perhaps is also the reason why he appears to be a surrealist, one who has moved away from the dominance of the mind and the rational that more often than not divides, and reached out to the subconscious where all is one in terms of the irresistibility of the force of life and living itself. His poetic self finds itself fulfilled in discovering the irresistible pulsating life and beauty in nature, in the nature of Bengal, and in being part of it. As he says in the last part of I Shall Return to This Bengal, perhaps you will see a glass fly ride the evening breeze, or hear a barn owl call from the silk cotton tree, a little child toss rice grains on the courtyard grass, or a boy on the Rupsaj turgid stream steer a dinghy with torn white sail, white egrets swimming through red clouds to their home in the dark. You will find me among their crowd. তিনি বলছেন, হয়তো দেখিবে যে, পারহ্যাপস সম্ভবত, প্রবাবলি, ইউ সি মিন্স ইউ গেজ, তুমি না দেখে পারবে না, বিস্মিত হয়ে দেখবে, আ গ্লাস ফ্লাই রাইড দ্য ইভিনিং ব্রিজ, সুদর্শন উড়িতেছে সন্ধ্যার বাতাসে। সুদর্শন হচ্ছে ছোট এক ধরনের গুবরে পোকার মতো পোকা, চকচকে কাঁচ পোকার মতো, কাঁচ পোকা বলা হয় বলে তাকে গ্লাস ফ্লাই বলা হচ্ছে। অর হিয়ার এ বার্ন আউল কল ফ্রম দ্য সিল্ক কটন ট্রি, না হলে তুমি শুনতে পাবে, হয়তো শুনিবে এক লক্ষ্মী পেঁচা ডাকিতেছে শিমুলের ডালে। আ লিটল চাইল্ড টস রাইস গ্রেনস অন দ্য কোর্টইয়ার্ডস গ্রাস, হয়তো খইয়ের ধান ছড়াতেছে শিশু এক উঠানের ঘাসে। রাইস গ্রেনস ছড়াচ্ছে একটা ছোট বাচ্চা হয়তো। or a boy on the Rupsaj turgid stream steer a dinghy, রূপসার ঘোলা জলে হয়তো কিশোর এক সাদা ছেঁড়া পালে ডিঙা বায়। কি করবে সেই ডিঙা নিয়ে ছেলেটা ঘোলা জলে? টার্জিড স্ট্রিম মিন্স ডাল অ্যান্ড স্টিলটেড স্ট্রিমে ছেলেটা কি করবে? উইথ টর্ন হোয়াইট সেল, সাদা ছেঁড়া পাল নিয়ে, টর্ন মানে ছেঁড়া, সাদা পালে ডিঙা বায়। হোয়াইট ইগ্রেটস সুইমিং থ্রু রেড ক্লাউডস টু দেয়ার হোম ইন দ্য ডার্ক, রাঙা মেঘ সাঁতরায়ে অন্ধকারে আসিতেছে নিড়ে, দেখিবে ধবল বক। ফলে রাঙা মেঘ যখন সাঁতরে অন্ধকারে নিড়ে আসছে তখন একপাল ধবল বককে দেখতে পাবে। ইউ উইল ফাইন্ড মি অ্যামাং দেয়ার ক্রাউড, আমারই পাবে তুমি ইহাদের ভিড়ে, অর্থাৎ কবিকে এদের মধ্যে পাওয়া যাবে। ফলে দিনের শেষে যে সাদা বকের দল মেঘের কোল ঘেঁষে নিড়ে ফিরে আসে তাদের মাঝেও কবিকে খুঁজে পাওয়া যাবে। এভাবে তিনি বাংলাদেশের রূপময় প্রকৃতির সঙ্গে মিশে যাবেন, মিশে থাকবেন, তাকে ফিরে আসতেই হবে। After the death, the poet wants to return to Bengal, Bengal, the place which has given him utmost fulfillment, and in death too he desires the same place. The poem starts with the note that he might have travelled various places and now he shall return to the land of beauty and his homeland, because Bengal is the place of his birth, Bengal is the home. So this landscape of Bengal has shaped the poetic sensibility of poet. He invokes the ethos of Indian culture and consider this Bengal as a land where emotional bonds last through many births. His mode is more of spiritual rather than being a material one. When poet says that he will not return as a man, a reader obviously might have got the idea that he is in some way misanthropic in his vision. He shall return as Moina or fishing kite, dawn crow, or the shade of jackfruit tree in the autumn season. The vivid imagery of different birds and that particular visualization is being portrayed by him through his surrealistic imagination, which is totally enlisting his vision of life. The point which is he makes clear that nature itself gives a kind of pressure to his stressed mind to release himself from the foundation of the mechanical life of human being. Again, note the vision which is clear. He chooses the nature as a recluse, not for escapism, but he wants to be a part of it very much. Most often people confuse him with the romantic poets, but his mode is more of the transcendental and he wants to be a part of it, want to be like them, not like Keats who chooses Nightingale to get rid of his melancholic pain, neither like Coleridge who chooses opium as a medium to forget his pain. Jibanananda, though like the romantics, finds a kind of recluse in the nature, but he wants to be a part of it. He does not want escapism. He gives the vivid analogy of the aestheticness of the Bengal land, its beauty, where he points the green fields, crops, and furthermore the sad green shore make it very evident that horror and trauma of the situation is very much there. He says that even the nature itself is invoking the angst of the situation. He points out owl, white egrets, which again shows his connection with the bird imagery. Notice this bird imagery also denotes freedom. He is so much pissed off with his life of insanity and horror that he used different bird images. His love with the nature and its imagery is so prevalent that he says that you can find me there only. He is so much like Wordsworth, who makes ordinary like extraordinary, but his mode is sensuous too. The most probable thing which one might see is that poetic persona is discovering the pulsating life and beauty of nature. His poetry literally let us to feel the certainty and power of nature, and this makes him utmost nature poet too. So Jibanananda Das, just like William Wordsworth or S.T. Coleridge, was a romantic in his craving to be a part of nature, but in a quite clear way he was different from the so-called romantics. Actually, the very craving for nature was in the blood of Jibanananda, because he was born in Borishal, now in Bangladesh. The landscape of this riverine district, known for its serene natural beauty, untempered by urbanization, the district does not have any railways even today, had a deep and pervasive influence on his life and literature. Not only did it shape his sensibility towards nature, but it remained with his poetic subconscious throughout his life at the most significant space out of which emerged his metaphors and images. Later in life, he wrote lovingly of the open fields in the town of Borishal, its evenings lit by glowworms, its mysterious nights broken by the shrieks of owls, its roadsides. All this could keep human souls absorbed for a long time. He maintained a distance from the crowd, from literary gatherings and learned societies, as well as from the political movements and ideological debates that kept his contemporaries occupied. Shy and soft-spoken, Jibanananda experienced hardly any exciting event in his life worthy of drawing public attention, except for his agonizing death at the age of only 55 in a tram car accident. His death on the night of 22nd October 1954, 8 days after he was hit by the tram car, brought down the curtain on the life of a man already crushed under the weight of poverty and anguish. Although now a canonized figure in the Bengali literary pantheon, he did not attain smoothly to this. Eminence, recognition, popularity came very slowly indeed. Most critics and fellow poets, the notable exception of his generous-minded friend Buddhadev Bose, himself a versatile writer, maintained a studied silence about him. The tradition-minded reader, engrossed in Tagorean splendor, found him different, exotic, and imitative of Western poets. His unconventional metaphors and uneven diction, the rawness of his language and his sensuous imagery became the target of untiring lampoons by several critics, including a notorious weekly magazine, Shonibarer Chithi, which consistently misspelled his name with gleeful malice. The Marxist critics did not lag behind, censuring him for his lack of social awareness and his dark pessimism. Buddhadev Bose described him as the quote-unquote the loneliest poet. There is hardly any voice today complaining of obscurity or obscenity, two frequent charges leveled against him by his contemporaries, because these two qualities, obscurity and obscenity, are the characteristics of modern poetry. The new poetics today has privileged the opaqueness of his language and has found in his rhythm and diction the fitting medium for the agony and anxiety of the fractured sensibility of the modern world. Marxists too have tempered their criticism. Jibanananda employed the practices of the symbolists as well as the surrealists within his own poetic world. He appropriated as much from the symbolists as from his Indian predecessors. It is not difficult to detect traces of several European poets in his poetry, or to link him with various tropes of the modernisms of his time. Jibanananda did not feel any urgency to publish these poems when they were composed. So the written poems were not published and there was no eagerness in the poet. He wrote them with care and love, opting for the rigidity of the sonnet form to regulate the soft and delicate emotion of the subdued patriotism. It indicates that Jibanananda responded to the contemporary political movements in his own personal mode, glorifying the country, yet avoiding the rhetoric of patriotism. He wrote with utter innocence, "You can all go where you wish. I by Bengal's expanse will stay." But this Bengal was not apostrophized as with a mother, nor was it identified any mother goddess. His Bengal, in harmony with the entire geography of his poetic world, is earthly, concrete, pulsating and sensuous, redolent with myths, history and poetry, and lively and vivid with its trees and plants and birds and beasts. Deeply rooted in the regional ethos, these poems, all intensely Bengali in temper and tone, are linked with the mainstream of Jibanananda's poetry in their rhythmic structures and patterns of imagery. Regional, yet sophisticated, sentimental but not lacking in depth, flowing with passionate love for his native soil, yet free from the arrogance of patriotism. These poems have a unique place in the history of modern poetry. To conclude, we can say that one of the best poems which links Jibanananda with the broader traditions of Indian poetry, celebrating the desire to live and to be remembered through several births, I shall return to this Bengal, to the Dhansridge Bank. Thank you, friends, for giving your time to listen to the discussion.